All right, welcome everybody listening from all around the world, all around this beautiful blue-green planet we call Gaia. Welcome everybody here listening in Australia, this beautiful country of ours, gorgeous country. Welcome to the Mystic Drop, where each week we try and journey down the road less traveled by, as the great Robert Frost once poetically put. Joining me today, I'm your host, Roberto Roya, is Sheryl Gotschall. Cheryl's had a lifelong interest in the paranormal, UFOs, spiritual, and supernatural phenomena. She is the chairperson of the UFO Research Queensland group. Sheryl has had many paranormal experiences herself since an early age, including a near-death experience, a bilocation experience, out-of-body experience, UFO sightings, a close encounter with a non-human intelligence, ET, and other mysterious and unexplained phenomena, which continue to propel her to understand what it means to be human. Sheryl has just become the Australian representative for a new worldwide UFO group called ICER, the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, which mission and vision are to humanity and planet Earth to live in conscious harmony with cosmic intelligences and preparing our world for contact. And I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Sheryl Gotschall. How you going, Sheryl?
Hi, good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you on here. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. So before we get started, I'd like to, because you're our first time guest here, we've got a mystic drop incantation that we'd like to share with you. You ready?
Yeah.
So we are two cosmic spiritual beings sitting around the campfire. Two drops of light from the Great Spirit. Truth is our path and wisdom is our teacher. We start with a salute and let the magic flow. All right, you ready, Sheryl?
Ready.
Awesome. So I'd like to start from the beginning of your journey. What were the supernatural and paranormal things that occurred in your life that nudged you on this journey that you're on?
Well, I've had back in the 90s, I was ill for 10 years. And during that time, I had a near-death experience. And just prior to that, I had a very profound out-of-body experience where I was sitting out on the front veranda of my home at the time, and my little girl, who was 3 then, so she's now 34, so it gives you an idea how long ago it was. And I was just sitting there watching her play in the front garden. And while I was watching her, it was a beautiful day. I was very relaxed. And I was just sort of very laid back, and I just looked up to the top of the power pole outside the house, outside the neighbor's house actually, and there was a bird sitting on it. And all of a sudden, I was in the bird. I was looking at me sitting on the veranda through the bird's eyes. And my vision was exactly as if, in ordinary reality. It was very clear, and I could see the roof of my house, and I could see across the houses behind that. I could see the trees, everything. And then by the time my mind's going, what on earth is going on? Boom, I'm back in my body, sitting on the veranda, watching my daughter again. That was very profound for me. It was probably more profound than a near-death experience or a close encounter, because it was spontaneous. Somehow I managed to be looking through bird's eye, because after that I wondered, what was the bird seeing, or was the bird even there, or what happened, So, but it did give me a really new understanding of bird's eye view.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So that was one of them, and it was to this day I still seem to marvel over it. But that's what led me into shamanism and shamanic practices, and which I teach now. So yeah.
With that experience with the bird, did you, like, over the years that you've thought about it, Do you think the bird was an ancestor or any significance, any connection to you?
No, it was just a pigeon. And it was just, I didn't feel it had any connection to me whatsoever.
Yep.
I know what you're talking about because I've had that happen to me where I was sitting on my front veranda in this house.
Yep.
And it was at a time when my husband was really ill before he died, and he was in full-time care. And a kookaburra came and sat on the deck railing and sat there for 45 minutes staring at me. I mean, it was the weirdest thing, a good full 45 minutes. So I know what you're talking about, like a spirit messenger, a guide, or something like that. But no, not this one. It was just a pigeon. It happened to be up on top of the power pole. And yeah, I didn't feel anything like that.
You go into consciousness.
And I find
maybe you connect with consciousness between the both of you.
Don't know. But you know, all the strange things that have happened in my life have all occurred spontaneously. I've never sought them out.
Yep.
They just happen out of the blue, spontaneously. And but each time something like that happens, it sort of, you know, my initial response is, I'll just put it aside. I think like a lot of people, just one of those things, just put it aside. But when you sit down and you think about all the things that have happened that you collect through your lifetime, and you go, wow, what on earth is going on?
That's amazing. What an experience. And that's just the start of it.
It was a very strange thing.
I'd like to congratulate you on becoming the Australian representative for ICER.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
it was a real honor to accept that.
I just it was only about a month ago that I found out that you were on that panel. So that's an amazing achievement.
Yeah. Well, when the representatives were selected, they were looking for people who, you know, who were seasoned UFO researchers, who sort of dedicated a lot of their time to the subject and looked at it deeply and broadly, and as well as scientists who had an interest in the subject and had been following it as well, and academics. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting collection of people from 29 countries now. And you know, a vast array of backgrounds, amazing people, amazing global group of people.
So what are their goals, and what do they want to achieve, say, over the next 10 years?
Well, part of that is to take the UFO subject to the United Nations, pick that up again, because a couple of people have done that before. There was Eric Gary from, I can't remember what country he was from, and there was someone from Thailand who I think it was, who had done that as well in the past, and it hadn't gone any further than that. So ICER wants to, you know, take the UFO subject to the United Nations and get the United Nations to bring more attention to the subject on a global basis. But of course, you can't just rock up at the door of the United Nations and say, hey, we want to talk about this. You have to have a sponsor. You have to have a country to sponsor you. You have to be seen to be doing the certain things as an organization, and then approach someone from one of the countries to sponsor a representative to go to the United Nations, give a presentation, and then various things happen after that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's a bit of a process.
That's part of it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a process before.
It is. Yes, it is. Yeah. But in the meantime, there are programs being developed to bring more awareness of the subject to the public and to the scientists and the academics. I'm part of a subgroup to do with contact. So we're working out various ways of making contact, there's going to be a scientific subgroup as well. And so it's early days for ICER. It's only a couple of months old. So we're still getting the pathways for the future set down, in concrete.
I've been reading Richard Dolan's new book, Alien Agendas. Fascinating book. Like he's pretty much going out there and saying they're here. These beings are here. They live among us. Through your own research and experiences, what do you think these beings, their agenda are?
I think there's a broad array of agendas. I think just like if we went out into space, we would have scientists, scientific experiments being conducted. I think that's happening here on planet Earth. From the various reports that I've read over the years, not just from what I've taken, but where people have observed what they call extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences, collecting samples for one, and that includes samples from humans as well, through the alien abduction experiences, which we were flooded with during the 1990s. And I took a lot of those, many, many, many reports. I didn't have a life during the 90s. I was always on the phone. So there's that aspect to it. Some researchers have proposed that they're studying humans, but it's gone on for has gone on for a very long time. So I think that there's more than just study going on. What that is, it's not exactly clear to me. There's talk of hybrid races being produced with human and alien DNA, which is certainly a possibility. I think we'd be silly to ignore that sort of idea. And, I don't think it's been fully explored by a lot of researchers. Some of them have been here to give warnings, to give information. There seem to be downloading information into people's minds for all sorts of reasons. For example, some years ago, I had a flood of people coming forward with paper and all sorts of equations written on the paper and saying, I don't know what this means. Can you tell me, do any of you know what this might mean? I'm getting this information download being given to me. And my husband was a scientist and, a senior university lecturer, etc., in engineering, and he was an inventor himself. And he'd look at it and he'd say, I have no idea what this means, So there was a very intelligent person who understood science, but it just wasn't making any sense to him. So it's really difficult to know what that aspect of it actually represents. And for what purpose?
Yeah. Well, I know you've had, like, reading your bio, I know you've had your own experiences. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had a close encounter back in around 1990, 91. And I was asleep in bed at the time, as often happens, but not always. And I woke up in the early hours of the morning. It was still dark. And between my side of the bed and the window was about 1 metre. And in that metre space were 3 small greys, what people call grey aliens, standing there looking at me. And they were silhouetted by the street light outside. And so I couldn't actually see their faces, but I keep saying this, every time I hear it, I think that sounds crazy. But I have a memory of their eyes, which were large and dark, and they were slightly almond shaped, sort of wraparound eyes, what people call wraparound. Whether they were actually their eyes or eye coverings, I really couldn't tell you. But of course I was terrified. I just woke up and I froze when I saw them, and they were about 3.5 feet tall, maybe 4 at most, but I think about 3.5 feet. And everything that happened as soon as I saw them was instinctual. There was no thinking about it. I pulled the sheet up over my head. I started saying the Lord's Prayer. which I had learnt in Sunday school as a child, and I'm not a religious person. I was made to go to Sunday school. I didn't realise I still knew it. I started reciting it spontaneously. And the next thing I know, it was morning and I was waking up. Now, my understanding is when you're absolutely terrified or terror-struck, you don't go to sleep. Your heart's pounding, you can be clammy, you can be, frozen and stressed. And I just went to sleep. So the next morning, I didn't remember what had happened until just after lunch, and something triggered my memory and the memories came flooding back. What that was, I can't tell you, but all I can tell you is what I experienced. My ex-husband was asleep in the bed at the time. He suffered insomnia, very bad insomnia. And so I only just had to move a little bit or breathe in a different direction. He'd be awake. And he just didn't stir the whole time, which is fairly typical of what we were receiving in abduction reports during the 1990s, where people would report that they would have an experience and their partner would be asleep in bed and just wouldn't move, as if they had been managed so that they didn't, wake up and become conscious of what was going on.
Right. Wow, what an experience.
And it was very, very, very frightening. Yeah.
It's funny how people have different experiences with different beings. With the greys, it's always this fear behind it. And then you've got like experiences with the Pleiadians. Have you had a lot of cases with Pleiadian beings?
Well, when you say Pleiadian, do you mean like more positive types of experiences?
Yeah. Like more like light beings I'm talking about.
Yeah. Look, not a huge amount. And I like to point this out to people. You've got to remember that during the 1990s, most of the close encounter reports were alien abduction experiences. Around 2000, they started to change, and they were mixed motive cases. So you would get abductions and positive types of experiences. And some people were telling me that they'd have these abductions and then they would have these positive beings who would come to them and they would work on them to help them heal. Now, whether that was emotional healing or physical healing or, trying to fix any damage that had been done to them during the abduction experience. And then after that, probably after about 2005, most of the reports we started to hear were more positive, uplifting, more of a, an empowering sort of experience. And it's the way that the phenomenon goes, because in the 50s and 60s, it was all very positive. And these were our space brothers, right? So, and then you don't know whether people were having abduction experiences to the same extent, because when the public start reporting a particular type of experience, then it creates an emotional climate and a receptivity to those types of experiences. And when they're all positive, people who have abductions can go underground. And then when they're all negative and abductions, all the positive types of experiences go underground, because you just don't talk about it in that particular emotional climate. So there's a few things going on there. The phenomenon itself can evolve as well. There could be different things going on at different times over 20-year periods or something. We've had a broad range of the types of beings that have been reported. And I was just saying this in an interview the other day, where coming out of America, we've had a lot of these grey aliens with the inverted pear-shaped heads, the dark eyes, etc., quite emaciated bodies, and about 3 to 4 feet tall. Whereas in our organisation, we've been receiving a sort of a quite a wide array of beings that are involved in close encounters, such as beings with skin that's like dolphin-like skin, very smooth, or they might be blue beings, or but some of them still in this form of the little grey types, some really tall, some are so tall they've got to sort of crouch over like this to get their head under the ceiling.
Yeah.
Some that seem to be a little bit more non-physical, both physical and non-physical. And some experiences are just really full of high strangeness, you know, where you don't even know what you're dealing with, really. I just think, where do I put that? There's a few of those too. And I expect other researchers have those as well. So yeah, it's been quite a wide array of the types of beings reported to us and the types of experiences. And I think the other part of that equation is, like, for example, when Bud Hopkins was alive and he was just talking about abduction experiences, like David Jacobs, they both saw them as negative. Some people didn't, but a lot of people did. And, you know, so, and people like, I don't know, Barbara Lamb, maybe Dolores Cannon, where they're saying the more positive type. You know, they're reinterpreting them in a different way. So yeah. Again, it just depends who's talking about what and who reports what to whom.
Yeah, you can definitely see that today with the whole UFO community. There's different factions and different beliefs with what's going on at the moment. You know, you've got the Stephen Greer group, where, you know, he's saying it's all positive, and then you've got, you know, Lou Elizondo coming out. He's saying, well, we've got to be careful because we don't really know who's coming into our environment.
I think you have to be sensible and you have to evaluate things critically yourself.
Yeah.
I think that you've got to remember too where these people are coming from. For example, Stephen Greer, his CE5 protocols grew out of a near-death experience he had, where he met beings, where he met extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
So it's got a different sort of flavor to it than someone like Lou Elizondo, who's come from that military background.
Yeah.
You know, so, and I think actually I agree with Lou Elizondo. I think that it would be silly of us not to you know, consider that some extraterrestrials could be a threat, because we don't know all extraterrestrials everywhere, and neither does Stephen Greer, neither does Lou Elizondo. But, you know, you've got to think logically and sensibly about it. And some people say, well, you know, there doesn't appear to be a threat because they're not invading us, etc. But there's many different types of threat in life, aren't there? So, you know, I sort of go down that line. Yeah. You know, I'm listening to people's experiences, but I'm also aware, well, we'd be idiots to think that everyone in the universe is happy to welcome us into the galactic neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm with you with that one. I like to keep the options open when it comes to all this. Yeah, and then keep that open mind about it as well. Yeah. Well, this comes to the next question of where are these beings coming from, in your opinion? You know, the majority believe that they do, you know, come from other planetary systems, but there could be a possibility that it's ancient civilizations that way back in the day, pre-Ice Age even, that could be here, and that have gone off planet and then maybe had bases like on the moon or in our solar system. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh gosh, I think there's so many possibilities. Initially, I thought that extraterrestrials came from other planets. Now I look back, you know, 33 years later, and I think that was pretty naive to think just that. You know, they could be time travelers, they could be deep space dwellers, they could be some of them. This is just some, right? They could be from the inner Earth. They could be from Earth. We just don't recognize them. You know, they could be camouflaged in ways we don't understand. Did I say time travelers?
Yeah,
could be time travelers. Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. They could be from other dimensions. I certainly think, and I can't say that I've got a huge amount of evidence, but I certainly think that they are somehow intricately entwined in human soul evolution. And purely because of some of the reports that I've received, because I also run an afterlife group, and over the years, people have told me stories where they've had out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and while they're in those altered states of consciousness or out of their body, they have come across extraterrestrial, what they call extraterrestrials. So there's some of those cases that I've collected over the years too. Also, there's cases where people have been, we don't know whether they're out of their body or they're just put into, or their consciousness is put into a scenario, or they're physically there, is not really clear, but where they've had interactions where extraterrestrials have shown them future things that are going to happen to them, like the souls of their unborn children, things like that. So, and then when the children are born, they are exactly like the children that they were shown in the altered state of consciousness. So there's a whole lot of things going on that even the afterlife community and the UFO community that really need to spread their wings and look further afield. And that's why I think it's really important to cross-pollinate subjects, because, you know, that's how you can go, well, maybe there's a connection there. You know, for example, Rosemary Ellen Guiley talked before she died, talked a lot about alien abductions possibly being performed by what the Islamics call the jinn, which are these non-physical beings that attach themselves to a family line, and they can either be benevolent or malevolent, you know. So there's a whole lot that we've got to put together.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it definitely seems like these beings have managed to manipulate the spirit world. It's sort of like magic, you know. It blows my mind. Really, it does.
Yeah, I certainly think that they can populate a place that we call the afterlife, but let's face it, we don't actually know what that is.
Yeah.
So it may be a place where human consciousness can continue to exist, and extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences, put it that way, because gee whiz, are all extraterrestrials beings from, you know, like what we think are from other planets or is from space? Who knows? You know, who knows? They could be ultra-terrestrials or celestials, or, you know, it's really hard to understand it all.
You mentioned before Hollow Earth. Have you had cases of people that have experienced going into the hollow of the earth, and there's a mystical place there?
No, I didn't say hollow earth. I said they could have come from within the earth.
Inner earth. Yeah, sorry about that.
In the earth, yeah. And I know that many of the abduction reports that I received, people said that they were taken underground.
Right.
Now, they could have just been alien bases underground. In some cases, in their experiences, there were extraterrestrials or aliens, also humans in uniform that seemed to be working in cahoots with these extraterrestrials. So, yeah, but certainly people reported going underground. And in those cases, they were shown particular scenarios, whether they're up on a screen or they were walking past rooms where the scenarios are playing out. You know, there could be like world disasters or floods or famines or something. And it was almost like these ETs were monitoring human responses to these situations.
Yeah. So the way they're traveling there, there's been reports of USOs, so unidentified submerged objects. Have you had a lot of cases of that?
Not a lot, but we've certainly had reports of people seeing UFOs lifting out of water. And a few of those were were north of Brisbane in the Redcliffe area over the years, of all places. I know that there was some down outside Sydney. I can't remember exactly. something reef. I can't remember what it's called out and down there, but and other cases around the world. I've had reports of UFOs seen to go into the water and they don't disturb the water, which is not unlike the UFO that was filmed, the footage that was released recently, where we see the image, infrared image or whatever it was, and the FLIR image, sorry, and the UFO was just above the water, and where the guys are saying splash, splash, and it goes in and then
Jeremy Corbell released that.
Yeah, and they say it didn't disturb the water.
Well, so they even went looking for it, and no crash retrieval, nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
so
sorry, you go.
I was going to say I've also had reports of UFOs seen entering the earth too, and mountainsides and things like that, where people have said, oh, it's going to crash, whatever that is, it's going to crash. They're waiting for the boom, and it doesn't happen. And one of those places is the Glasshouse Mountains, north of Brisbane. Other places is Mount Warning in New South Wales. I think it's in New South Wales or Queensland, on the border there somewhere. Where else was there? Oh, there was a report like that out near Pine Gap in one of Timothy Good's books called Alien Liaison, where it just entered the earth near Pine Gap. And curiously, I received a report which happened back in 1996, I think it was, down on the Gold Coast, outside the Twin Towns RSL club there.
Just down the road from us.
Yeah. And there was a gentleman outside having a cigarette. Another man was out there with him. And they watched this object come in over the water. And now when you're there where the Twin Towns is, and you're on the water there near the boardwalk, I think it is. That wasn't there when I saw it, but I've seen photos since. There's a piece of land here with multi-story buildings on it. And they were looking out over the water, and this object came in, and it was large, it was dark, it was faceted like a gem. It was in an oval shape, disc shape, and it was about, I think they said it was about, I'd have to look at my notes, but it was 50 meters above the water and 100 meters out from them off the shore. And it just hung there quietly, and the moonlight was coming down and reflecting off. That's how they could see the facets. And it just hung there for a while. And then it took off, and it went through the multi-story building as it took off. And the man said to me, that thing just cut through that building like butter. He said it was amazing to see. So their physics is so advanced that going through physical objects doesn't seem to be an issue for them. How it affects the humans that were in that building at the time, I have no clue. But but they just cut through these physical objects.
That's crazy. I've never heard a story like that before.
So you can see how, going into a mountain or, just disappearing into the ocean without any splash is not going to be a big deal for them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Me and my fiance 2 years ago, we went to Egypt for the first time. I've always wanted to go there. And, we saw the Great Pyramids and Abu Simbel, all these other beautiful structures. And we also love the show Ancient Aliens. Such an amazing show. Through your research and your experiences, how did these civilizations help these beings help the civilizations back then to build these beautiful structures, or not just in Egypt but all around the world?
That's a really good question, isn't it? Because if it was humans, why didn't we keep building those beautiful, huge structures out of blocks of stone that are so amazing that they say they can't do that today? And where did those civilizations go? So I certainly think that it's a real possibility that extraterrestrials were involved in that, or some advanced technology was involved. But even if it was human advanced technology, where are the remnants?
Yeah.
You know, where are the remnants of that technology? So, your question was, how did they
how did these beings help that civilization back then to get to that amazing feats of engineering, architecture, alignment with the stars? How did they do it in your opinion?
Yeah, look, I don't really know, but I do know that there is a history of mythologies in various cultures where these beings came from the sky and they walked the earth and they walked among the people, and particularly in the Mesoamerican area. You had Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan, and he was named a few different things. And he walked among the people and taught them language, taught them writing, taught them how to grow food, all those sorts of things. And then he left. And they've been waiting for him to return ever since. So we have these sorts of stories in various cultures around the planet where these sky beings came and they walked among the people and played a role in their culture somehow. And I think that some of the religious organizations, or is it organizations? Yeah, I guess so. They're founded on those types of experiences too. For example, I'm just trying to think, was it the Mormons who had the being that appeared that had the gold plates? I can't quite remember now. It's been so long since I've talked about that sort of stuff, you know, it's sort of a bit hazy. But yeah, and actually that's how I got involved in this, really. It sort of catalyzed me into it because I was doing a Bible study many, many years ago in the 80s. And I was reading the biblical scriptures and thinking that what I was reading with these angelic visitations was more akin to modern day close encounter reports, where people were, having paralysis and falling to the ground and these light beings appearing, etc., etc. And I'm thinking, I don't know whether that's angels. I mean, is it even logical to think that they're angels, or is it more logical to think that these are actually extraterrestrials? And that's the path that I went along.
Yeah, 100%. But even like going back to Egypt, like we were driving through Cairo, and it's all run down, like the people's places that they live in, and it's just. And then you go look at the pyramids and how beautiful and perfect that was built. It's two different things. Do you ever think, when do you reckon, if ever, we can get back to that beautiful alignment with those beings and have that close, intimate relationship with them? Do you think it's ever going to happen again?
I think there's a possibility. But I think a lot of things have to happen before that. A huge amount of things have to happen. If we're to do it openly, put it that way, we need disclosure. We need education programs for the public to be able to accept the existence. We've got to change the way we think from being so Earth-centric to galactic-centric. We've got to think of ourselves as living in a cosmic neighborhood. And that's a lot. That's a lot. I don't think that'll happen in my lifetime. Well, if it does, it'll be exciting, but I'm just not sure. Yeah, I'm just not so sure it will happen in my lifetime, because it's a huge bite for our civilization to take off. But did we know we were going to have a pandemic 18 months ago? So anything can happen. And I think we are certainly living in times of the unexpected. And with the way things are going, with the these Navy footage that's being released, and the media doing an about face with and pursuing the truth about it rather than denying it, and there certainly has been a very quick change of pace in regard to calling people, nutters and freaks and weirdos just because they're looking at the extraterrestrial phenomenon. particularly when you've got the likes of the types of people who've been speaking out about it now, just in the last, the last 6 months we've done a huge turnaround. So I think anything can happen.
Yeah, and this is led on perfectly to the next question, the big question, the big D, the disclosure. For a lot of people, it means different things. If you talk to Stephen Bassett, it's the formal recognition from heads of states to say we are not alone, we've never been alone. Other people think that disclosure is not just a one-time event, that it's been happening over the last 70 years, slowly to get the people ready. What does disclosure mean to you?
It means an adjustment. It means, I've been talking about the effects of open contact for quite a few years, way back. The first time I ever spoke about it was in the early 90s publicly. And I'd sort of thought through all these things about life after disclosure, what that might be, and what would change or the various, sorry, my phone's ringing in the background. Answering machine's got it. It means a lot. It's I guess there's various forms of disclosure, like there's disclosure with a big D. Does that mean that all the officials all of a sudden come out and say publicly that we're not alone in the universe? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a drip feed, and it's going to be may not be slow, but it's going to be in little bites. Let's put it that way. And I think that would be sensible. Yep. For the public to get used to the idea that we're not alone. And to be honest, the recent report that came out, which was put together by the intelligence services for the US Congress, was, where was I going with that? Oh, yes. There were surveys done about that, and most people didn't know about it. They still didn't know about it. It's only the UFO community that's been following it. Yeah. And we are a minority group. So there is a lag time for information to actually get out to the public. And then, of course, we have obstructions to that happening as well, don't we? So I think it's going to take time. But when it does actually happen, I think that I don't think religion's going to be affected much at all. It's quite stable, even though we've had all of this all along. Certainly, there's concerns about finances, how that's going to affect all sorts of things there. Fuels that we'll use. I mean, you have to be very specific when you say disclosure. How it's going to be rolled out, because that is going to indeed affect how what happens and what it actually means. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does 100%. And it's not just going to, as I said, I don't think it's going to be a one-time event. As you said, it's going to be drip, 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 and it'll go on for many, many years, because the rest of the world needs to catch up to what our community is all about.
Yeah. And I used to listen to the science show on the radio many years ago, and there was a scientist on there who was saying that the problem with getting information out to the public, and you can apply this to the UFO community, is that it's always a 20-year gap. Yeah. There's scientific breakthroughs all the time, but science, like ufology, has a shortage of people power and people who are actually getting information out. Yeah. So you have science writers who do that, and we have UFO researchers who write things and publish things, but they're a very small group of people trying to get out to billions of people on the planet. So it takes a time. It certainly takes time.
Yeah. What advice would you give to upcoming, people that are interested in these sort of subjects and want to break into the field? What being, experienced as you are, what advice would you give them?
You mean if they want to be investigators or researchers?
Researchers,
or?
yeah, investigators, researchers, and want to try to break through into this community, and
I think if
be figures as well.
Yeah, I think if they want to be investigators and researchers, number one rule is grow a thick skin, because you're going to get a lot, you're going to get held down a lot with your ideas, particularly if they're against the grain. And I've always sort of been on the periphery of mainstream thinking in the UFO community, because we're all human first before we're anything,
Yeah.
So that's one thing in particular. But I think drop everything that you think you know, and make sure you've got room in your mind for new ideas. Make sure that you're happy to, if you want to search for the truth, you've got to be prepared to turn over every stone and face what you find, rather than, oh no, I don't like what I see under that stone. That's not the search for the truth, right? So yeah, I think they're really the key points.
That's great advice. And what's the biggest lesson you've learned through this journey?
Wow, that's a good question. I haven't been asked that before. Biggest lesson. I think it'd have to be that, well, I hate to sound like a cliche, but it's not about the destination. It is about the journey along the way. It's about the doors that you open and go, oh, that's interesting. And you go down this path, oh, that's interesting. And but I think not to lose sight of critical thinking. There is a lack of that today. And I see this on so many, on social media across the board, that people are too willing to stray from, now it sounds like opposition to what I just said before, but you've got to be grounded in your investigation too, in your quest for knowledge. You've got to keep your feet on the ground. You can have your head in the clouds, but you've got to keep your feet on the ground. The UFO phenomenon is so much more than gathering data and trying to make sense of it. It is has a huge psychological component. And there is still a lot of wishful thinking going on. People don't want to learn from people who've been in the field. They'll send us photos and we'll say, well, sorry, that's a lens flare, right? We've learned a few things along the way. And they go, no, it's not a lens flare, it's a UFO. I'm going to ask somebody else. Okay, go and ask somebody else, They want things to be what they want it to be. And this is what you're up against. Sometimes the UFO community, the people in it, is its own worst enemy. And I think that's always going to be an issue, because we are not educated like you are in academia, where you get all the basics first, then you can go on and make up your own mind. You don't, there's no initial training. This is learn as you go on the job. And that's why you've got to have the critical thinking. You've got to use your head. That's what it's there for, to be sensible about what you're looking at. Does it make sense? If there's too many loose ends, and it's probably going to unravel, yeah, I think that's probably the best advice I can give.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And it's been a real pleasure having you on the show, Sheryl. Thank you so much for being here. And I hope you can come back and we can talk about, other things like the afterlife, your near-death experiences, and all that next time.
Oh, I'd love to. I can talk for days.
Thank you so much. I'm your host, Roberto Roya. This is The Mystic Drop, and you're just listening to Sheryl Gotschall. Thank you so much, Sheryl.
Bye.
Thank you.